Welcome, everybody. I can't see you, but if we've never met before, I'm James Fox. I'm the founder and the founding director of the Prison Yoga Project. And I'm super excited to introduce you to my friend, Stefan Liebb, whom I've known now for 17 years. We initially met in San Quentin when he became involved in our program, but we've stayed in contact with each other over the years and over the past several years of him being out. And this is hopefully the beginning of a series of webinars that we're going to do with formerly incarcerated people. And I felt it was only appropriate that we start with Stefan. So I'd like to introduce Stefan, and I'd like to first ask if he would introduce himself and also talk a little bit about his background of where he grew up and what his life was like in terms of his early time in life. So Stefan, take it away.
Thank you, James, and thank you, everybody. First, I just want to acknowledge where I am right now, because that's really the essence of yoga, is I think being present for everything. And, I'm always grateful, and even more so for where I am now. And especially with how things are inside. I'm in contact daily with incarcerated folks. I get their letters. I get calls from family members. And the reality of what I don't have to suffer is always with me. So I just want to acknowledge that. I'm thankful for where I'm not. And I have so much more that I'm thankful for. So it's been 7 years since I was paroled from San Quentin after serving 32 years total on a life sentence. And I was paroled October 30th, 2013. So I celebrated 7 years just a few weeks ago. And I'm often in contact. I work for the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, and I have a homeboy, a good friend. We did a life sentence together, some of it. And he's from San Francisco, works with at-risk youth. But I get to see him even during this COVID. And one thing we say is, we went through a lot. We both went to administrative segregation. I was in the Corcoran SHU, the security housing unit. But I always believed that I could get through anything. If your mind's strong and you're in good health in there, your body's strong, and your faith is strong, that I'd get through anything. And now, with the conditions now, with people I mean, just think about it. You have police blaming the inmates for bringing this disease into the prison. And most of them don't wear masks. So there's a lot of ignorance because they obviously believe they're immune to it. But they're mixing people that are infected with people who are not infected. There's basically people confined to their cells virtually around the clock in institutions where there's outbreaks. There's no escape from it because you have to breathe. So to me, that's more horrible than anything I had to go through. And, you know, I'm blessed to be able to participate in the work of trying to free people that are in prison. Just this morning, I spoke to the son of a man who's been incarcerated 33 years, 60 years old now. And he was telling me that his dad left when he was 8 years old. You know, he's married and brought his son to his father. So being able to maybe help somebody go home, especially given where I was, it really is something wonderful.
So I wondered, Steph, if you could talk a little bit about your time while you were incarcerated, you know, from your experiences of being in ADSEG to coming to San Quentin and
Yeah, and I will speak about things, and you know, everything I talk about is taken on a different perspective in light of what CDCR is doing and not doing, knowing that people who are no longer currently dangerous are being exposed. So it just reveals the mindset. I mean, whether doing rehabilitation programs inside, they only operate because it serves CDCR's interest. CDCR is the word an appellate court used to describe the violation of the constitutional rights of inmates at San Quentin was that they acted with deliberate indifference to a known risk. So it's not like, hey, we didn't know this thing was deadly. We didn't know the consequences. No, they were told by medical experts repeatedly. That's what deliberate indifference means. Hey, we know all this is going to happen, likely to happen, and we know the ramifications, but we don't care. So that's just the mindset. You're incarcerated with people who have custody over you who don't care. So you're subject to their rules, and then there's rules of survival in there. And you know, people that go in with the type of time that I had, you go to a hot maximum security prison, and there's all kind of gang violence divided along racial lines. There's all kind of forms of violence and manipulation, and that's among inmates. So, like for me, my first experience was in Old Folsom Prison, another old prison, not, you know, I think not as old as San Quentin, but my first day on the yard, my first day on the weight pile, I saw this big tatted out guy under like 400 pounds on a bench press, and get stabbed right in the neck. The weights toppled over. They called an alarm. They cleared everybody off the yard. This was in the morning, and the yard was open again in the afternoon. And that was my first day. So I already decided then, hey, I'm not going to live long. But, you know, I know, like, I'm not going to accept just anything here. So I mean, looking back, it's just like I told Rico, like he did like over 25 years. I said, you know, Rico, we survived everything in there. Any day you're locked up, you look at somebody the wrong way, a cop's having a bad day, and your life could be ruined. I mean, look at someone the wrong way, step on their foot or something. Hey, what are you looking at? You know, you say nothing, that's the wrong answer. You know, so and your life could be over, or you're put in a situation where you have to be violent. So to survive one day is almost a miracle. And then to do it for a year, 365 days, times 10 years, 3,650 days. And then to do it for 30 years, that's over 10,000 days to survive. So I told him, I said, it's not because we were that strong or smart. You know, like there was a higher power that was watching over us. So, you know, when I go through things out here, I have to remind myself that I came out for a purpose. And the whole thing about me doing this type of work now, and this is what I was doing in there, was trying to help people get out, you know, file lawsuits, file legal actions against the Board of Parole hearings for denying everybody parole. And the issue about parole is this: when you're dealing with a lifer population, how you morally account for taking someone's life, that's a person's own faith, and that's a spiritual process. So I'm not bringing that into this conversation at all. You know, that's something sacred. But we're talking about the law now. California, the lawmakers, they came up with a system of punishment of people who take someone's life. And they quantified it. You have manslaughter, you have second-degree murder, which used to be punished by a death up to 10 years. Then it became a life sentence. And then you have first-degree murder. Now, they have people that have a first-degree murder. The parole board has a chart that tells you how much somebody should do based on whether they knew the victim or not, you know, whether there was prolonged suffering. They have a bunch of factors, like they quantify this horrible crime. So they have metrics. And the law says that parole shall normally be granted. At your first hearing, you go and they set your date. So your parole shall normally be granted. For like 2 decades, virtually no one had parole granted. And if they did, the governor took their date. So, and they essentially admitted they were wrong, and court said they were wrong. So what I'm saying is this: it's about them applying the law fairly. The standard for letting somebody out or not is whether they're currently dangerous. You know, you have people, we're representing somebody 72 years old. He's been incarcerated over 40 some years, and his mind shot, and he had mental health problems going in to the system over 40 years ago. So that's the system. So when you're dealing with a system like that, anything goes in there. The cops will set you up to get killed. They'll set you up on yards to get into fights, to bet on it, which was documented in Corcoran Shoe where I was. It's just a brutal, brutal place. And when they say, like, you know, they expect it now, it used to just be called CDC, California Department of Corrections, because then in the penal code in California, it explicitly stated that the purpose of imprisonment is punishment, period. Later on, they added that are for rehabilitation. And they don't really provide it. And when you start out in these level 4 prisons, they're violent. I mean, if you just do a Google search of violence in California prisons, there was like a 1 month period in the last year where there were like multiple homicides in various prisons in like a 2-week span. So this is what judges are sentencing people to, these conditions. And now there's a whole thing like in California, well, statewide, they changed this process where people could be resentenced for their crime. But only the district attorney or the director, the head of the corrections department, could recommend people for resentencing. Then it goes to a hearing in front of a judge. Now, the director does look at cases where the sentences were unfair, or sometimes the law changed, like a judge had to increase the sentence for certain enhancements and now it's discretionary. So they recommend those kind of cases. And we have a progressive district attorney in San Francisco, so we try to submit cases, but they still reject a lot of them. So they have a law where if incarceration doesn't serve the interest of justice, the judge could resentence somebody, but they have to be recommended by the DA. But the DA is looking at these crimes from 30 years ago, where people are doing life sentences for a third strike, which could have been a robbery, and they're doing a life sentence, and they've already done 20 some years on it. So the system is unfailing. It's a bureaucracy. It epitomizes what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil, describing bureaucrats who, they're just pushing buttons. And most of them don't even want to think about the ultimate consequences. They're civil servants.
So, because most of the people who are, this is really important for people to understand, in terms of the environments, and you're describing maybe not so much at San Quentin, the last several years pre-COVID, but you're describing the kind of environment that we're going into to introduce yoga. So I wondered if you could speak a little to that, in terms of how you see that and your own personal experience of that.
Well, when you're when I was doing time, I'm trying to get a positive out of every day. So if there's an opportunity to learn something, especially something I was interested in, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to check it out. And, I looked at some books that I came across when I was in prison, like Iyengar Light on Yoga. And I had seen on Valley Public Television when I was in the SHU in Corcoran, Lillis Folan had a yoga program on early in the morning when they came by the cells to pass out razors. And I it was just interesting. I didn't understand. I said it looked like stretching, but I was interested in all this breathing. And when James introduced it to San Quentin, it was a relatively small group, but I could feel the immediate benefit after one practice. Like my body felt light, I felt relaxed, and I said, there's something I need. So I think it's the word about yoga is spread to all prisons now. So I don't think there's as much resistance as when it was originally introduced, where maybe some people thought this was something that women do. And you know, there's a lot of closed-mindedness in prison. You know, in San Quentin, maybe there's less of an expression of that, you know, through college classes. But, you know, most people, they don't want to stand out in prison. You don't want to stand out to the cops. You know, you don't want to draw attention to yourself. And I mean, there's people that do draw attention to themselves. But I mean, if you're prudent, you don't want to draw attention to yourself, period, in prison. That makes your life easier. So if you do things that are outside the norm, then people might think they're drawing attention to themselves in something that could be a negative way. That's initially like the resistance. But, you know, I think now it's become well known. I mean, you know, even through like the newspaper, the San Quentin News that gets distributed to all prisons, there's been a lot of articles about yoga and people who practice it. So I think people welcome it now, especially now.
And can you talk a little more about, I mean, you were in the yoga program for 9 years.
9 years.
And can you talk a little more about, you know, obviously, if you stayed in the program for 9 years, there was some, well, I don't want to lead you to, you know, I want you to basically talk about, you know, the path of staying in the program and what you were experiencing. And then the fact of the matter is that you continue to practice and have continued to practice since you've been out.
So it goes back to what I said, the first class, I felt the difference. And it wasn't as easy as I expected. So it was challenging. So I like challenges. So that was also an appeal. But the main thing was because, you know, I lifted weights, I ran, you know, I boxed in prison when they had boxing. You know, I was always working out, and but this challenged me, and I needed something to relax because I couldn't sit still, and I felt relaxed, and you know, I put my body through a lot, and I could feel even my body relax, and you know, I didn't know I was in prison sometimes in practice, because the peace I had, and when I really was able to really drop in, it didn't matter where I was. You know, I was just in my breath. So, you know, it was too good. And I said, this program, you know, I know how things change, they shut things down. I said, I got to learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can. So I remember James had a little piece of paper with the asanas, the sequencing, and I'd ask him for them. You know, like I try to memorize the classes, and I go to the yard and do it. And just by doing it on my own, I could kind of say, okay, this isn't right. But I practice every morning. I go to on cement, you know, my bare feet, and and even if it's cold, and but I practice every day. And then he give me his little cheat sheets, you know, and I have a whole class I could do on my own. And I mean, prison's stressful. You know, I remember I practice in the morning, And then I remember when he brought that yin yoga to us. I do that in the evenings on the yard. And sometimes, you know, you go through just incidents in there. I just break off and practice like 15, 20 minutes. And, you know, when I was paroled, I was on parole in Oakland, and the program, the transitional housing where I lived was in Oakland on Sanford and San Pablo. But the program where I had to go, it was called Options, was in downtown Berkeley. And I used to walk that every day. I loved it. I mean, I used to walk everywhere when I first got out. So I'd walk to downtown Oakland and check into my little classes there, which, you know, it's just a meaningless barrier. It's stuff they make you do that's totally unnecessary and keeps you from getting ahead in your life. But that's a whole other facet of when you get out of prison. But they had yoga to the people back then, and I go there every day in practice. And then James was able to get me classes in Piedmont in Oakland. And I've been going to yoga classes right up until this shelter in place. And now I do YouTube classes, which I actually like. I actually like it better. I kind of like practicing in my apartment. You know, I got the dog near me, and you know, it's more personal because I'm competitive anyway. And even though they say yoga is not competitive, whenever you're around someone else, when I'm around someone else doing it, you know, I want to up my game a little. So, but yeah, yoga, I'm doing a lot of yin yoga now. I mean, this is, these times now, it's like prison, because for me, my sister just had a baby girl, beautiful baby girl. She's 6 months now, but you know, we had to isolate during the pregnancy, and you know, they went away to isolate. So it's just the people I love the most, I can't be around them, which is like prison, and just the uncertainty too. So, but again, I'm grateful that I deal with those issues out here. So, but it is everything happening in prison with this COVID, with, you know, the board. You know, I live it with my job, and you know, for a while, like the stress was a lot, and I'm able to recognize it. So, you know, I go to the mat, and I'm also cognizant of how much I should push myself. And I guess that's that Liebb, ahimsa. So I'm applying that more, and just looking at all this as an opportunity. You know, when I was in what they call the hole or security housing unit, you're isolated. Like I was in a cement cell by myself, and like a year and a half. And I actually came to like it, because in that isolation, I found a lot of peace. I mean, it was a struggle. I mean, with myself, with my mind and thoughts every day. And, but it was a good one. You know, it was necessary. And without all those distractions, I was forced to, you know, for a while I had nothing, no TV, nothing. So I had to like face myself. And that's what this COVID isolation and being able to do more work from home, it's given me more time to draw inward. I was talking to James how I watched Cassandra on YouTube, her videos, and she had one on a new moon practice and was talking about how the new moon or the hidden moon, it's a time to go inward like a seed. It's planted in the soil, in the darkness. And so I feel like this is a time for me for new beginnings and relearning a lot of the things I learned with James. I was blessed to go to trainings once I paroled in San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley. And it was just like the classes in there, the practice and the things, you know, James interspersed in the classes. Like our classes were mostly moving and practice. You know, it wasn't like lecture and asana. It was asana. But there were moments, and usually we all needed a little break to get our breathing calm. You know, James would hit us with the limbs of yoga and what the benefits are to the nervous system, you know, the calming effect of like inversions, breathing exercises. So all that was presented in these trainings when I went outside to them outside. And but I noticed there's a lot I forgot. You know, I was in that class 12 years. So it's like, you know, good lessons, they're worth repeating. So I'm always.
Yeah, Stefan's referring to the trainings that Chanda and I taught on the outside, and he always came and participated along with us as a guest and kind of as a co-facilitator. After you got a couple under your belt, you became kind of a co-facilitator of those trainings. And I just wanted to mention that last year you were kind enough to go to Israel to our training in Israel. I wonder if you might mention your experience of doing that.
Oh, that was a beautiful opportunity. You know, it was my first trip outside of the United States since I paroled, and flew to Tel Aviv, and I stayed in Yaffo, the old city, which is beautiful. Like hearing those Australian waves, that's what I heard every day. You know, the Mediterranean, and you know, they have some surfers there too. And just every day being able to walk on sand and hear the ocean, it's so powerful and healing. And the practice was incredible. Leora, she's a wonderful Israeli woman who goes into prisons. They work with women who are trafficked. They work with people with schizophrenia. They do a lot of work, the yogis and yoginis in that community, doing service to others. And it was just a wonderful training, really about trauma and methods, not strictly yoga, other movements, to basically help connect with people whose minds are closed off for one reason or another. I mean, you know, yoga is powerful. I've seen it, you know, the breath is powerful. And with this ancient system of breathing and the movement, anything's possible because you're dealing with vital energy in our bodies that come from our creator. So it's limitless. And, you know, for me, it's always about slowing down. And even in prison, I had to slow down. You know, especially San Quentin, you could get involved. You have a job, a lot of programs, classes. You can make a busy schedule for yourself there. But yoga was always a time to slow down And that's also something I'm grateful for.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention to everybody when you were talking about Leora, um, Leora has a program. I believe it's Yoga for All, and it's our partnership program in Israel. And Leora came to a training that I taught with Josephine, who you also met when you were in Israel. And Leora came and took our training in Copenhagen, and then went back and started sharing the trauma-informed practices with her teachers, and then asked us if we'd go there and teach this training. So that was the training that you were involved in with Leora and Josephine and Sharon.
Yes. Yeah, Josephine is an expert on trauma.
So I'm not sure if everybody understands the fact that you're an attorney, and that you, once you were released, that you took the state bar and you passed the bar and you became an attorney.
Well, they wouldn't license me, so I want to back up. I
Okay.
passed the bar exam, but they have a moral character provision, and they denied me because they said I hadn't been off parole long enough to demonstrate good moral character off of supervision.
And is that going to be reviewed again? What's the status of that?
Well, the trial judge, I was actually a trial, and it was pretty intense. Like they have a prosecutor, and they're basically trying to retry me for my commitment offense. And I had a good judge. She said I was transformed. It was remarkable, but I wasn't off of parole long enough, which was just an arbitrary standard that she declared. For whatever reason. And the decision and the facts were so good in my favor that the prosecutor appealed it, trying to get the record changed, and failed. So we petitioned to the California Supreme Court, which has the ability to review state bar court decisions, and they simply denied me review. But two of the justices, including Justice Liebb, he wrote a rare dissent and stated that he felt my case should have been reviewed.
Yeah, I testified at that so-called trial.
That's right.
Years
That's right.
back. So
Yeah.
I got a firsthand experience of them retrying you for your character, which not only myself, but you had CDCR staff people, you had attorneys who knew you, who all testified to your character and the fact that beyond any doubt you had rehabilitated yourself and deserved to be able to practice law. So,
Well, what was kind of jarring about the whole experience was this. After I paroled, I volunteered at the University of California, Hastings, their immigration clinic, the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, CGRS. They do incredible work. I interned there, a volunteer position, for about 4 to 5 years with Blaine Bookie and Karen Musolo, some wonderful people. And their mission is helping refugees, primarily women who are victims of domestic abuse and violence, and LGBTQ and children. That's their client base. And they are helping asylum seekers remain in the United States. And so that was where I was basically learning about doing research and skills you need after you've been locked up 32 years, like how to turn on a computer and use a mouse. And so I thought, let me see if I could become licensed as an attorney. So I walked to the State Bar building on Howard Street in San Francisco, and in the lobby, the security, they don't let you go up on an elevator. They tell you to sit by a phone after you tell them what you want. And then you talk to somebody on that phone. I said, well, I want to apply to the State Bar and I need an application. And, you know, I didn't have a computer, so I needed a hard copy. I needed a paper application. So this woman brings me one, and I said, excuse me, I just want to know, I was just recently paroled, and I want to know if I'm wasting my time doing this, you know, applying to become a lawyer. And she says, well, no, not if you can show you've been rehabilitated. So I was smiling because I said, wow, I just did that to a parole board. That's the hardest, that's the hardest tribunal or forum. I mean, the grant rate when I went was like a 1%, or very low, 1 to 3%. So I said, I just went through this. This is easy. But I was wrong. I was wrong. And it just shows the mindset of really the legal system, where the agency that licenses attorneys, they have a very negative and stereotypical attitude against anybody who's had contact with the criminal justice system. It's like I'm part of a legal system where they have a right to request any information and records from me. They asked me for the names and the prison numbers of anybody I ever helped inside or outside. I said, what if I help people move? You know, since I've been out. And a lot of my homies, my friends, they're, you know, they have INS holds, they parole. You know, you don't give authorities information like that. Like, they felt like there's no privacy at all. Like, fortunately, I don't keep records like that. And but the fact that they ask for them and they feel that's normal, that they have a right to the name, contact information, prison number, anybody I ever helped, 32 years in prison. I mean, this isn't boastful, but the hundreds of people I helped. Things like I don't even consider helping people. You know, years later, hey, you helped me when I had my appendix. You hooked up that emergency appeal. You know, and I'm friends with, you know, that person, Falangi, and his family. But I don't even remember something. You know, he had to remind me about it. So they want to know everybody I ever helped.
And now that you've been working, how long have you been working at the San Francisco Defenders, with the San Francisco Public Defender's Office?
2 years.
2 years.
A little over 2 years. That my anniversary was also earlier in October. Jeff Adachi, may he rest in peace. You know, he hired me, gave me a chance, and you know, it's, to me, everything is for a reason, and here's why I say it. The San Francisco Public Defender's Office, they're a top flight office, and their main business is defending indigent people accused of crimes. They also have a very strong immigration unit, so they help with immigration issues. They have a juvenile division, they have a veterans court, a mental health court. So they have specialized departments for clients that fall into these categories. But they had no experience in prison law. No, but maybe a couple of people been inside prison. So I was able to bring a couple of groups into San Quentin through tours, and twice to meet with the editors of San Quentin News. And that was a life-changing experience for some of them, to actually see the conditions. And I think it's because of that experience and the backing of the leadership in that office, Mano, Matt Gonzalez, and Daniel Harris, Jacques Wilson, that they took on the representation of all San Francisco incarcerated clients in San Quentin, filed emergency petitions for their release, and we're litigating it now. And just actively, someone calls, needs help, if there's something we could do, if they're from San Francisco, if we could offer advice, if they're from another county, I'm in a position to do that. So, you know, and understanding CDCR. So I'm here for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's this is taking over so much of our office's time and focus. Now is post-conviction relief, getting people out of prison, dealing with reentry, because it's a crisis. You know, they're forced to release more people. And all these nonprofits, all these agencies that deal with reentry, with housing, they don't have the beds anymore. It's, you know, they're quarantining people in hotels. I get firsthand stories from clients about the quarantine process, how, you know, you get out of prison, and some of these folks came out of San Quentin where they were infected in there. Now they're coming out to COVID out here. They're putting in a quarantine where these transitional housing people are putting people from the streets who weren't tested and breaking the quarantine. And they don't care. So just the fear, the anxiety, you know, coming out, and then coming out, now you fear being infected again. So it's I think there's a lot of work to do. I mean, there's a lot of work to do.
Whoa. Yeah. Such a in-depth look into the criminal justice system and all the inequities involved in it, particularly as it relates to, you know, mass incarceration, California.
People should have no illusion. I mean, you know, we have people from other countries, but people should have no illusion about the United States. Well, let's just take California. I can only speak of what I know. You know, I can speak about the California prison system. Even before it was exposed as being cruel and unusual punishment because of the lack of adequate medical and mental health care, it was inhumane just because of the conditions, the violence. And basically the prison system is a mental institution now. You know, they criminalize mental health disorders brought about by whatever, but a lot from drug use, which is also often coupled with mental health issues. So they criminalize that. And then with 3 strikes and all these tougher sentencing laws, you have someone with a mental health issue in prison like 5-10 years. And then you expect them to come out and those conditions ameliorated whatever they were going through. I mean, it's insane. It's just, if it's not cruel, then go back to deliberately indifferent. So trying to make a moral, ethical argument or even a logical argument is like futile, because they're not swayed by that. I don't even think they're swayed by, the only thing that really would sway them, if there was a way they could increase staffing, meaning the number of correctional officers, which means more union people and more dues and more power, which they're trying to get again, to reverse the whole tide of loosening up on tough on crime laws, on decarceration. But that's their real ambition. And that's why a lot of reentry is basically run by former CDCR people, and they all have contracts and ties with CDCR. It's just money. You know, there's a certain amount of money the state's going to spend, 10 billion, whatever it is right now, somewhere around there.
11.
And
Yeah, it's
11.
11 billion, yeah.
So 11 billion, and it's how you're cutting up the pie. A lot's going to go to salaries, some's going to infrastructure, but then it's like they get money to kick out in contracts, and it's who's getting that discretionary money, and what's it really being used for? So it's just a business. I learned in there, nothing they did, I never took it personally. My thing, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of you ever knowing that anything you did ever hurt me. I'm gonna just not let you know.
Yeah.
Like I'm cool. I don't care what you do with me. To me, I'm good. and when they can't threaten you, then they start trying to make deals with you. But
well, I remember you several times quoting Viktor Frankl around that whole issue too, about essentially they've got your body, but that's it. Nothing else.
That's it. They can't control my mind, and I wouldn't let them. And that resistance, like a lot of things I did were very unhealthy, like shutting down my emotions, like just really kind of punishing my body, just that discipline, because it's a volatile world, and it's in the air. So I'm ready. Like if something happens, I'm ready. I'm trying to stay peaceful at all times, but I'm also ready. I had no illusions about where I was. That San Quentin, with all the programming, everything, it's a veneer. Because James knows this, just abruptly in the middle of class, yard recall, everything shuts down, you get back in your cell, and there are times you might not come out again for a week or two, which isn't that long compared to other prisons. Yeah. So, and you're going to get stripped out naked on the yard and have everything in your cell searched and tossed up. That's just normal. So, that's just incidental stuff. So, it's when they want to come at you with force, the people that work in San Quentin, the correctional staff, they're just human beings. Some are just making a paycheck. Some got laid off years ago from Home Depot, and this was a way to support their families. But it's like anything, you give people power and some control. I mean, you see it on airlines with COVID announcements threatening people with prison if they don't wear a mask. Now, I'm not getting into the whole thing about, wearing a mask or not. I'm just talking about how they addressed paying customers like they were inmates, and how I filter things. I hear some of these governors, and they're talking to all the, I'm one of you now, I'm not in prison. They talk to us like we're inmates.
Yeah.
That's how they talk to inmates. They knowingly lie to you and make and change rules. And you know, they expect you to just not question it. That's an inmate. And if you do question it, there's going to be some consequences.
Right.
And that's what's happening in there with the COVID stuff. Like you can't, they're avoiding contact. Like they don't want to be asked anything or answer anything. And if you ask about like, hey, why didn't you guys not wearing masks? They're going to put you someplace where they feel you're going to catch it. That's the threat. I mean, so that's how vicious it is. And I'm not, that's something I got from letters, multiple letters with people. And you know, I'm not into all these conspiracies, but from Old Folsom, I got at least 10 letters where people said, hey, I know, like, I think they're trying to get everybody here infected, the way they're moving people around and mixing them. I don't know. You know what?
Yeah.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Well, we've got some time left, and I wondered if this might be a good time to open things up if people have questions that they could ask, any questions that they might have, any comments that they might have. You're certainly welcome to chime in.
I'd just like to read out a comment from Marie, who says, it's beautiful to hear you say, my breath felt like freedom. And I reflect on, I don't know how you survive without some sort of practice that helps you remain resilient. You're talking about taking it day by day and 10,000 days of managing your response to provocation. And something that I've always, you know, the resilience of people who are incarcerated and have survived that is to me remarkable. And I don't know that I have it. Maybe I'd find it if I had to, but I don't know that it's hard to imagine from the outside what's required there.
Well, I have something to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, reflecting, I had a simple task in there. It was simply survival. And at a time, there was a point where I had a revolutionary mindset where I was so in opposition to CDCR. I had exposed the mistreatment of AIDS and handicapped patients in the California medical facility, mistreatment of people in administrative segregation, and I was able to help people write grievances. And you know, I caused pandemonium in the hall. I had gang leaders tell everybody, hey, don't lock up, because the stuff they were doing to me and one of my friends. He told the whole yard not to lock up. The associate warden had to come to the yard. They ended up flying me in a 4-seater airplane from that hole to the Corcoran shoe. I mean, that's how much they wanted to get rid of me. So, but my task was simple. I didn't care. You know what? There was another quote I live by. It was, I think it's attributed to this boxer, Tex Cobb. He says, you know, I don't care if they kill me in the ring. You know, if they eat me afterwards, it doesn't matter. So I really didn't care about my life. I studied like revolutionary literature, you know, the IRA, the underground armies in Palestine. And I had that mindset. You're just not going to break me. And that's simple. Mm-hmm. That's easy. That's easy. Now coming out here, like I watch my sister being a mom and the patience to 24/7, you know, if her daughter's sick or anything comes up, stop everything to deal with it, while being a wife, you know, being a sister to me, and now having another baby, and seeing her husband, you know, what it is to be a dad. That's, and then just supporting yourself out here and dealing with families, which, you know, myself and a lot of my homies who did sentences, that's an issue. Like, it's always family issues coming up. So that's harder. And then, as brutal as the conditions were, you know, I became used to it. That was my whole world. I didn't want to be comfortable. You know, I always gave my cellie my mattress, and I'd sleep on a cardboard board, and I put like a blanket over it. I never wanted to be comfortable in there. You know, plus it felt better for my back. But on lockdowns, you know, staying on a slab like that after a few days, when I first came out, I couldn't sleep on a mattress. You know, I had to sleep on the floor. You know, I was so used to it. But that's easy. That's easy. Life out. I told my brother once, you know, I was going through some stress, like studying for the bar, and then Wells Fargo shut down my account for no reason. I had access to no money. And I said, man, this is the worst. He says, what about prison? I said, that's easy compared to this stuff. So, you know, don't underestimate what every one of you do, like just being who you are, you know, in your own life, in your own circle, your own family. You know, it's hard out here. It's harder out here. It really is. You know what? And I worked for the Asian Prisoner Support Committee in Oakland. They run programs in San Quentin, Roots. I graduated the first class, and you know, they help a lot of folks in there and who get out in Oakland, and they're in Chinatown. So, you know, a lot of folks I did time with, you know, my homies were there coming in or working there. And then, like, after a couple of years, like, I'd see guys get out, like I knew from the yard, like our table. And they were always like laughing out there and smiling. And I could just see the stress on their faces. And it's like, it's hard out here. It's hard when I first got out, just trying to fit in. It's hard. Like, I mean, there's also some amazing things. Like, I try to go back like that. You know, they talk about the first love in Zen, you know, that beginner's mind. Like, I still remember it took me 32 years to get out. And the way I got out, I got found suitable by the board, and the governor has the power to reverse that decision. So the decision was reversed. And my friends who were incarcerated with me hired a great lawyer, Charles Carbone, and he filed something in court, and I won. But I was still preparing to go back to the board in January 2014. That's when I would go back. Like, after the governor takes it, it's 18 months. So I was meeting with an attorney from UC Davis, Anjali, who was preparing me for the board. But at the same time, I had this court order that they could appeal. And if they appeal it, you know, and it's happened before. In 2009, a federal judge basically ordered me released, and a higher court stayed the order. And then the US Supreme Court said that the federal courts can't interfere with California parole board hearings. So I was used to, you know, I was inured to being denied, seeing friends denied, but just, hey, oh, as long as I could fight, there's another step to take, I'll go. But you know, I'm not giving up. So I have this court order that says the governor had no legal basis to overturn the board's decision, and they had 60 days to appeal it. So in the last week of, or 10 days of that 60-day period, everybody went on lockdown in North Block. And they, it was I think a Monday, and they make everybody come out of their cells, everybody. So you know they're gonna search your cells, make everybody go to the yard, and then like you'll come off lockdown soon. So, but I'm glad, like I get to the yard, I could do my yoga outside and Tai Chi and maybe run, you know, just get out of the cell. And I also had an appointment for a legal visit. So that was the 59th day. And my attorney said, I checked the Court of Appeal website Sunday night and they still hadn't appealed it. But all they have to do is push a button and that's it. I'm not going home. So I said, let's prepare. So, you know, we get through the visit and I go back to the yard, we get in, and I know like a lieutenant in the building, and I could have maybe got a phone call. I said, hey, can I get call my lawyer, my other lawyer, the one, Charles Carbone. But I said, you know what? I don't want to ask because you know what? They don't just say no sometimes. They like to say no in a nasty way. And I never put myself in that position ever. So I wasn't going to do it for the first time where I need something and I'm asking them. And you know what? I don't have a right to it or a way to challenge it after. I don't ask them for favors. So the next day we come off lockdown. And everybody, when you've been locked down for like a week, 10 days, everybody wants to call their loved ones, their girl, their wife, hey, visiting's open, and the phones are jammed. And I go to see my counselor to see if she heard anything, you know, if they appealed the order. She didn't know anything. So there's a friend of mine, Arnulfo Garcia, who may he rest in peace, was the editor of the San Quentin News, a beautiful, beautiful human being. And was killed in a car accident with his sister shortly after he finally got out. But he was on the phone in North Block, and he was in yoga we on the Thursday class, with James's class, Thursday, Arnulfo.
You got him in. You got him into the program.
And he was on the phone. He couldn't get through. He tries to hand me the phone, but that's illegal. Like I could get written up, which means when I go to the board, there's no way I'll get a parole date. I said, no, could you call a number for me? So I had him call my ex-cellie who hired Charles Carbone, and he said, he says it's all good. And I said, ask him if he's sure. He says, yeah. So I get on the phone, and it's Mike Nolan, my bunkie. I say, hey, Mike. He says, it's all good, homie. I said, you sure? He says, yeah. I said, you sure? And I let my current, I know I'd had a bunch of stuff, including from the 1,000 Mile, the running club. They gave me these brand new Nikes. Like I never wore good running shoes. I told my bunkie Tran, hey, all this whole box is you if I go. So he was locked in the cell. I go up, I said, Tran, hey, I'm out of here, that's you. And then later I go to the yard, the counselor tells me you're leaving in a week. And I paroled on a Wednesday morning, October 30th, 2013. And the reason I remember it's a Wednesday, I mean, I remember 10:30, 10:30, but the reason I remember Wednesday morning, because that Tuesday evening was the original yoga class. you know, the first one, Tuesday night, 6:20. And I got to go to yoga the night before. I share a birthday with Sonia. She put them on the chat. But yeah, and here I am now, you know, and you know, I know it's just gonna get better.
That's
So
fantastic.
does anybody have a question out there?
We've got a couple of other questions here in the chat. Sarah asks, I have a question about managing reentry and the emotions that might come up running into barriers like your experience with the state bar. And she wants to know if you could talk about you know, how you've moved through those experiences. And then we've got a couple of other questions after that as well.
Well, I'll say about my own experience that I did 3 years on parole, and I could have done 7. And I had that motivation. Hey, I'm getting off this as quick as I can, because it was a bunch of restrictions that, like, I'm working for the refugee clinic doing country conditions reports, you know, things that are vital to people that don't have any power. And I'm blessed to be able to contribute and to learn. And I'm being pulled away from meetings that are senseless, or someone started using in the house where I'm at, and they want to test everybody. The barriers to just it really becoming a regular person. It's like there's almost an interest in keeping you at a subservient level on assistance, so you stay within the system, you stay in their bed, and they get money. And I have a lot of issues with these organizations, and you know, they're icons in San Francisco, but they could say they're client focused, but they're not. They're not.
So how did you maintain your balance through that stuff? I mean, I know you were going to yoga classes, but it was more than that.
You know, initially it was really hard because I just came out of prison and I have a prison mindset. You don't shake it automatically.
Right.
You know, like I came out, like, you know, if I'm in an area that looks like sketchy, I'm not crossing the street. You know, I'm not like, you know, I'm conditioned on in there. You know, you don't back down. You don't show any weakness, which is stupid out here. Like my first time I got mugged, I wouldn't give them anything. I told them they're gonna have to take it. The next time the guy showed me a gun, you know, I said, and I tried to shame him. You know, I say, you know, I tried to fill the San Quentin card. It didn't mean anything to this youngster with a gun. And then I tried to shame him. I said, "You're gonna jack me for a 5?" And I, you know, an iPhone 5, and the battery was draining like, you know, in a half hour. But anyway, yeah, he got my phone, but I needed a new one anyway. But look, I didn't get through it constructively a lot of the time. You know, I was self-destructive. You know, my mind got real negative. You know, I had to check myself. I mean, it's a whole, like, it's what I was saying to Bill. Would you deal with out here? Whatever I've dealt with in there for 32 years dealing with stuff like my brother, dealing with burying our parents, dealing with all kind of family stuff that comes up in every family. And while working, building a career. Mm-hmm. You know, that's hard. You know, so no matter how much you plan, look, I knew when I knew I was going home that Wednesday morning, and I had like a week to kind of get ready, I wasn't in a rush. The people I wanted to see and the way it works in Quentin, people come in certain days, you know, so I wanted to thank people, say goodbye. And I knew my vacation was over. I knew I'm not going to be doing yoga 3 times a day and, you know, training for marathons in there and, you know, taking laps around, just walking laps, you know, for an hour around the track. You know, I knew that's over, but it's just so many different stresses out here, and then like becoming reawakened to feeling emotions, and just learning how to process those things, and then becoming a part of a family, and you know, now being around a newborn. It's just wonderful things. But you know, I didn't learn how to deal with that now. A lot of the things I had to experience out here.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that really strikes me, you know, is just so plain, the insanity of the fact that you create this environment that like does not prepare you in the least bit. In fact, every minute you spend in an environment is probably, you know, in terms of knowing and understanding and being able to navigate the, you know, world outside the walls with no structure, all the chaos, all the different kinds of stresses, everything that you pick up, well, maybe not everything, but so much of the way you have to adapt to survive in that environment doesn't serve you on the outside. So I think it always feels remarkable to meet, you know, somebody like you who's navigated that transition and is in a very successful way. It feels to me like you're very successful in transitioning back in or back out, in or out. I don't know what it is.
Well, thank you for saying it, but I don't feel that way. And I feel like it's one day at a time, and not saying it in a cliche, because I've had friends that were leaders in there, shot callers in there, facilitators for programs in there, lifers that got out, one's back in, and I don't think he'll ever get out.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've seen another one. I don't think he's incarcerated, but started using meth and did horrible things out here, a lifer. So, you know, I could recall spots I was in out here where one thing went wrong, I could have been back in.
Yeah.
So, you know what? It's something I don't take it for granted. I can't. And being involved in working with prisoners, it's helping me it's painful, you know, living this stuff, but I think it keeps me grateful and focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that, you know, I think one of the things that you're pointing to, Steph, is that you've had a dedicated yoga practice for 17 years, right? Maybe more.
Yes.
And it's just like, well, okay, you got a dedicated yoga practice. That means you can handle everything emotionally. And that, you know, now here's the question I would ask you though. How do you think you'd feel if you had never done yoga and you didn't have a yoga practice?
I don't think I would have gotten out. You know, I wouldn't have had that interchange where the boards could see it, could feel it. You know, and I would have the tools to deal with what everybody has to deal with out here every day. You know, and I feel like I still have negative ways of coping, but I have some positive, and I'll take that. You know, I'll take that.
Positive outweighs the negative. Yeah.
We've got one or two more questions, and a lot of people just noting how inspirational hearing this is for them and is for me. I echo that. There's a question about, and I want to rephrase this a little bit. You talked about being very resistant towards the system, and the question was, I'd love to hear how yoga helps you overcome or soften the resistance, and how. And I guess I would like to rephrase that to say, to ask, well, do you feel like your resistance is softened or changed in some way? And does yoga play a part in that? And if, without any expectation of one, that it has or hasn't.
So when I first went to classes out here, I don't know if it resonated more, like with female instructors, but I always heard that you got to soften, and I didn't understand what that meant. Like, what are you talking about? Seriously. And like, I'm just understanding that about like softening into the poses. And because I think ultimately in there, no matter how much I relaxed in a class or in a pose or in Shavasana, subconsciously, I knew I was in prison and I'm going back to a cell. So I can relax all the way. I don't think I ever relaxed all the way when I slept. Maybe there's, what that REM sleep, maybe there's like fractional portions, but I remember saying to a friend of mine, Sterling, who was going home, I we used to talk a lot. He did a lot to help people with legal issues too. And I said, Sterling, and he always had a smile in there, and we worked together in the kitchen, and sometimes I'd feel down, and he had this booming voice. He was a facilitator for this program Impact. And, you'd come in and he'd get your interest. He had that enthusiasm. So I remember saying, Sterling, you handle everything well in here. And I think we both do to an extent, but I think like just being in this environment, and we're on North Block on the upper yard under these awnings, I said, just being in this environment, there's like a certain level of stress like you can't shake. And I bet when we get out, it'll be like a weight coming off of us. And that goes back to the day I paroled. I was met at the gate by Eddie Zhang, who a former lifer, a friend, and my brother Alan. And I remember that whole morning saying, I'm going to be present for this. I'm not going to rush it. So I was in no rush. Like in receiving and release, I got processed out with people that weren't lifers, and we get on the van, get checked out, our IDs. And I remember thinking, this is so easy. Why did it take so long? And when I stepped out, I see my brother and Eddie and San Quentin. It's that ocean view, that crisp air. And I hadn't seen like a clear view of the ocean like that for decades. And I remember like thinking it's beautiful here. And I closed my eyes and I felt like this wave of energy through my body. And I remember thinking, hey, don't like imagine something. But I stayed with it and I felt it. And I remember thinking, this is how it feels when all you have is love and joy in your heart and no stress. And I tried to keep that feeling for a long time out here. and I lost it. I did lose it, but I'm trying to find it again.
Beautiful.
We have a few more questions, but we are at time, and I really...
You know what? You got people here from Australia. Let me just say, I'll answer a couple more questions.
Okay, I'm going to take, we got one or two more questions that are in the chat now. And then we'll draw the line there. So I want to make sure, Nicole, let me know if I missed something here. So the questions, and I'm gonna give you both of them at once here. Well, I'll do them one at a time. So yeah, at what point was yoga accessible to you in prison, and what made you enroll for your first class? And I guess you mentioned earlier that you had seen Light on Yoga, and then there was in the mornings, and I hear this a lot, well, I've seen that lady do yoga on the TV. Is when I ask guys, what made you want to come, what made you sign up for the yoga program? And I would say that like 25% of the time, the answer is I've seen that lady on the TV. So you had a little bit of exposure before you got a chance to practice. So yeah.
It was, and read like Men's Health has articles on yoga. So I was looking for an opportunity to learn. And what was it, about 19, what was it, 90, what year was it, James? The first class?
2002.
2002. Yeah, is when I started.
I remember, I'm just going to tease this out, but I remember you saying something to me about the approach that I took in why you felt that was compatible with working with you guys.
Oh, because it wasn't watered down. It wasn't like yoga for inmates or yoga for people in prison. It was it wasn't like patronizing, where we're teaching we're getting a diluted version because we're not capable of doing real yoga. So and that goes to what I said about it being challenging. There was always modifications and telling people to work within their limits, but what we were shown was these are the real poses. And it was kind of like gratifying in a way, like when I went to my first class, like yoga to the people. Oh, I know how to do this stuff. Like there's some little variations I hadn't seen before, but this isn't, it was kind of strenuous, their pacing, but it wasn't anything like, oh, where's this coming from?
So what was the other question, Bill? There was another.
So we've got another question from Nikita. She says that one of the things that stood out most to her from the training was James saying that it's not appropriate to ask people to close their eyes or to fold forward while inside. I would just like to say that we probably would say that we give people an option to let their keep their eyes open, but if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, you're welcome to. But these are things that can be triggering, and so I remember the very first time I taught inside R.J. Donovan State Prison, and we get down to the end of the practice. It was my very first time in. It's the first time that all these 15 guys have been in a practice with me, and I'm looking out over the circle, and we're in Savasana pose, the final resting pose, and I got 15 guys in a circle lying on their back, stiff as a board, with their eyes open, staring at the ceiling. And I thought, well, what did I do wrong? And so I'm wondering maybe if you can talk about some of those things about, like what might feel in a practice uncomfortable, and how does that changed?
I've never felt uncomfortable in any practice that James led, not for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's That's my reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, let me qualify that. Like in yin yoga, you know, there was that type of bodily discomfort, you know, that I was taught to acknowledge but not react to stay still and to just feel. But I didn't feel uncomfortable in the sense of something was inappropriate or triggering
Mm-hmm.
anytime during James' classes.
So felt even at the outset felt comfortable, like laying down in that final resting pose and eyes closed and.
Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, Bill, I saw too, Manja did raise her hand and we did miss her earlier on when she raised her hand. So if Stefan's okay, do you mind if we give Manja a moment?
Of course.
Cool.
I'm gonna. Manja, do you want to speak? Let me find you here. And you're on mute, but you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
This is Manja from Aruba, Steph.
Hi, how are you? This is so nice to talking to all of you. And James, first of all my love to you. You were the one that made me do this. I did your course in Holland last year and I was doubting all the way. But then when I came back to Aruba, I was doing this. So Stephen, this is a question for you. For me, this is like a personal question, actually. Did you feel loved? When you were doing yoga, did you feel loved, like in your heart? Could you feel it when James was teaching you?
I have to say yes, because I felt peace. And you can't have peace without love. But that wouldn't have been the word that came to mind while I was experiencing it. It was more peace.
Okay, thank you so much. You know, I'm teaching all these young boys, and you know, at the end of the class, when I bring them into the Shavasana, a lot of them cry at the end. And you know, I always wondering, you know, if I'm doing the good thing, you know, if I'm doing right here, because I'm trying to comfort them, and I'm not their mom, but you know, it almost feels like that sometimes.
I think you're doing a beautiful thing. And, you know, I think that they feel free to cry in front of you. You're doing the right thing.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm really admiring you, and I'm really admiring you for sharing all this with us. And I know this whole Corona shit that is going on, and the prisons are using this as a way to keep us outside. But I think we all know that. And thank you so much. You unmute me now. There are a lot of other persons with questions, I probably think.
All right. Well, actually, that is going to be it. Stefan, is there any last thoughts that you want to leave us with today?
Just, I thank you all for giving me an opportunity to tell some of my story. And just want to say namaste. Peace to all of you.
Yeah. Namaste.
Namaste, Steph.